I'll never forget the moment my future mother-in-law looked me up and down in my worn Salvation Army blazer and said, "Well, at least you seem clean." What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the poor scholarship girl sitting at their mahogany dining table was actually worth more than their entire estate. And by the time they discovered the truth, it would be too late to undo the betrayal that nearly cost me everything. Welcome, this is Voice of Deborah, and I'm here to tell you true life story. My name is Anna Moore, and I'm 58 years old now. But this story begins 32 years ago, when I was 26 and foolish enough to believe that love could bridge any divide. Growing up in San Francisco's Chinatown in the 1960s and 70s, I learned early that appearances could be deceiving. My parents, immigrants from Hong Kong, ran a small dim sum restaurant that barely kept us afloat, or so everyone thought. What our neighbors didn't know was that my father, William's Way, was a mathematical genius who'd been forced to flee China during the Cultural Revolution, leaving behind a prestigious position at a university. In America, he cooked dumplings by day. By night, he invested. Mei Ling, he'd tell me using my Chinese name, the greatest weapon you have is being underestimated. Let them think we are poor. Let them think we are simple. Meanwhile, we build our empire in silence. By the time I was in high school, my father had turned his restaurant earnings into a substantial stock portfolio. By the time I graduated from Berkeley, yes, on a full scholarship though we could have paid, our family was worth several $1,000,000. But we maintained the restaurant, lived in the same modest apartment, and told no one. Wealth makes you a target, my mother would say. It makes people treat you differently. You'll never know who truly loves you for yourself. I didn't understand the wisdom of her words until I met Richard Worthington III. I met Richard at a charity gala in 1992 where I was volunteering as a server. I'd taken the job not for the money, but because my father had taught me that you learn more about people when they think you're beneath them. Richard was 28, tall and handsome in that effortless way wealthy people often are. Sandy blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that seemed genuine. He was different from the other guests. He actually looked at me, really looked at me when I refilled his water glass. "You're too smart to be serving canapés," he said, catching me off guard. "Excuse me. I've been watching you. You're reading the room, analyzing everyone. You're not really here to serve, are you?" I was flustered. "I'm a volunteer. The charity benefits underprivileged youth." "That's admirable." He smiled. "I'm Richard. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? When you're not working, I mean." That's how it started. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks through Golden Gate Park. Within 3 months, I was in love. Richard was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams. I told him about growing up in Chinatown, about the restaurant, about my parents' struggles. All true, just not complete. I didn't mention the investment portfolio. I didn't mention the properties my father had quietly acquired. I wanted to know if Richard loved me for me. The red flags started small. 6 months into our relationship, Richard invited me to meet his family at their estate in Pacific Heights. The house was a Victorian mansion with a view of the bay. Old money, the kind that came from railroad fortunes and shipping companies. His mother, Patricia Worthington, was a tall, severe woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice. His father, Richard Jr., was warmer but distant, the kind of man who'd built walls around himself years ago. "So, Margaret, Richard tells us you work at a Chinese restaurant," Patricia said over dinner, making it sound like I worked at a gas station. "My parents own a restaurant, yes. I help out sometimes." "How quaint." She took a sip of wine. "And you attended Berkeley on scholarship?" "I did." "Well, at least you seem clean," she said, as if bestowing a great compliment. Richard squeezed my hand under the table, but he didn't defend me. That was the first warning sign I ignored. The second came 3 months later when Richard's younger brother, James, made a joke about me being a gold digger at a family gathering. Everyone laughed. Richard laughed too, then quickly added, "She's not after our money, she's got nothing to dig for." More laughter. My face burned with humiliation. But I stayed because Richard was attentive when we were alone. He brought me flowers, told me I was brilliant, promised we'd build a life together away from his family's prejudices. Once we're married, none of this will matter, he assured me. We'll be our own family. I wanted to believe him. Richard proposed on a rainy evening in November 1993, in the same park where we'd had our first walk. It was simple and sweet. Exactly what I wanted. I said yes with tears in my eyes. That night, I went home to my parents' apartment above the restaurant. They were waiting in the kitchen, my father doing his nightly calculations at the worn table. "Bah, Ma," Richard proposed. "We're getting married." My mother's face fell. My father set down his pen. "Mei Ling, sit down," he said. "What's wrong? I thought you liked Richard." "We do. But you need to tell him the truth before you marry him." "What truth?" My father opened the ledger he'd been writing in. Not restaurant accounts but investment records. "Your mother and I have built something substantial. When we pass, everything will be yours. You will inherit approximately $8 million, plus the restaurant and 3 commercial properties." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. $8 million. Bah, I thought we had maybe. We let you think we had little because we wanted you to grow up understanding the value of money, of work. But now you're getting married. Your husband needs to know what he's marrying into. No. I stood up abruptly. No, I'm not telling him. Mei Ling. Ma, you told me yourself that wealth makes people treat you differently. Richard loves me as I am. If I tell him now, everything changes. I'll never know if he wanted me or the money. My parents exchanged worried glances. "This is a mistake," my mother said quietly. "Marriage without honesty is building a house on sand." But I was stubborn. I was in love. I thought I knew better. I had no idea how catastrophically wrong I was. We married in a small ceremony in June 1994. Richard's family attended but made their displeasure clear. Patricia wore black to her own son's wedding. During the reception, I overheard James tell someone I was Richard's charity case. But Richard and I were happy at first. We rented a modest apartment in the Sunset District. Richard worked at his father's investment firm, and I worked as a financial analyst at a small consulting company. A job I'd earned on my own merits, though the Worthingtons assumed Richard had gotten it for me. The mockery was constant but subtle. At family dinners, Patricia would ask if I needed help with the complicated silverware. Richard's sister Caroline would offer me her gently used designer bags, cooing about how I probably couldn't afford such things myself. Richard never defended me. "They don't mean anything by it," he'd say. "That's just how they are. You're too sensitive." But the worst was yet to come. 2 years into our marriage, my father had a massive heart attack. He died before the ambulance arrived. I was devastated. Richard was supportive at first, helping plan the funeral, letting me grieve. My mother was broken, suddenly aged beyond her 60 years. 3 weeks after the funeral, my father's attorney called me in for the reading of the will. I went alone. Richard was at work, and I didn't think much of it. The attorney, Mr. Williams, no relation, laid out the documents. "Your father's estate is valued at approximately $9.2 million, he said calmly. "This includes stocks, bonds, 3 commercial properties in Chinatown, and the restaurant. Your mother retains half as his spouse. The other half transfers to you immediately, with the remainder to be held in trust until your mother's passing." I sat in stunned silence. 9.2 million. It had grown by more than $1 million in just 2 years. "Your father also left you this letter," Mr. Williams said, handing me an envelope. Inside, in my father's careful handwriting, "Mei Ling, by now you know what we built. This wealth is not just money, it is freedom, security, and opportunity. But it is also a test. Watch carefully how Richard reacts when he learns the truth. A good man will celebrate your security. A weak man will feel threatened. A dangerous man will see an opportunity. Trust your instincts. Trust what I taught you. Be careful who you trust with this knowledge. Love." My hands shook as I read it. My father, pragmatic until the end, had given me one final lesson. I should have heeded his warning immediately. Instead, that night, still raw with grief and seeking comfort, I told Richard everything. At first, Richard seemed shocked but supportive. $4.5 million, he said, doing the math. Margaret, that's incredible. Your father was a genius. I know. I wish I'd told you sooner. Why didn't you? I was honest. I wanted to know you loved me for me. He pulled me close. Of course I love you for you. The money doesn't matter. But everything changed after that night. Within a week, Richard suggested we move to a bigger apartment. Now that we can afford it, he said. Within a month, he wanted to buy a house. Something in Pacific Heights, near my parents. Richard, I'm still grieving. Can we wait? Of course, he said, but I could see the impatience in his eyes. The real shift came when he told his family. I'd asked him not to, but one Sunday dinner, he announced it casually over dessert. By the way, Margaret's father left her quite an inheritance. About $4.5 million. The silence was deafening. Patricia's fork clattered to her plate. James choked on his wine. Caroline's eyes went wide. Then Patricia laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. You're joking. I'm not, Richard said almost smugly. Turns out my wife is wealthier than all of us thought. The mockery stopped immediately. But what replaced it was worse. Patricia began inviting me to charity boards, the same ones where I'd served as a volunteer. You really should join, Anna. People of means have a responsibility. James suddenly wanted to discuss investment opportunities with me. Caroline asked if I'd co-sign a loan for her struggling boutique. And Richard began making plans. Big plans. I've been thinking, Richard said one evening, 6 months after my father's death. We should consolidate our assets. Put everything in a joint trust. Why? We're married, Margaret. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. It's just more efficient for tax purposes. Something in my gut twisted. I'm not sure that's necessary. His face darkened. You don't trust me. It's not that. After everything we've been through, you still see me as the rich boy and yourself as the poor girl who has to protect her money. Richard, that's not fair. What's not fair is that you kept this secret from me for 2 years. What's not fair is that you let me and my family think you were some charity case when you were sitting on millions. It was our first real fight and it was brutal. Richard said things that night that cut deep. Called me paranoid, called me a liar, said I'd married him under false pretenses. In the end, exhausted and guilty, I agreed to set up a meeting with a financial advisor to discuss options. I should have listened to my father's voice in my head, screaming warnings. The next few months were tense. Richard pushed constantly for the joint trust, and I kept finding reasons to delay. My mother, increasingly frail since my father's death, advised me to wait. Something is wrong, she said in Cantonese. I can see it in his eyes. He looks at you the way a wolf looks at prey. Ma, you're being dramatic. Am I? Your father warned you. Listen to him even now that he's gone. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake my unease. So I did something I'm not proud of. I hired a private investigator. What he found shattered my world. Richard was having an affair with his ex-girlfriend Vanessa, a socialite from another wealthy family. They'd been seeing each other for 5 months, starting just 2 weeks after Richard learned about my inheritance. But that wasn't the worst part. The investigator had obtained emails. I read them in my car, sitting in a parking lot, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the papers. From Richard to Vanessa. The joint trust is almost set up. Once I get her to sign, half of everything becomes mine immediately. California is a community property state. She doesn't realize that once it's joint, I can clean her out in the divorce. She's too emotional about her father's death to think clearly. It's almost too easy. From Vanessa to Richard. And the life insurance policy? From Richard to Vanessa. $5 million. I took it out 3 months ago. She signed the paperwork thinking it was for the joint trust application. She barely read it. Listed you as the executor as we discussed. Once the trust is joint, we wait 6 months for the contestability period to end. Then, well, accidents happen. She drives across the Golden Gate Bridge every day for work. Those railings are lower than people think. I vomited right there in the parking lot. My husband was planning to murder me. I went into survival mode. Years of listening to my father's stories about surviving dangerous times in China kicked in. When threatened, become very quiet, very careful, and very strategic, he'd taught me. Never let your enemy know you've discovered their plan. I went home that night and acted normal. Kissed Richard hello. Discussed dinner plans. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him. About the joint trust. You're right. We should do it. His eyes lit up. Really? Yes. I'm sorry I've been difficult. I was just processing my grief. But you're my husband. We should share everything. He pulled me into an embrace, and it took everything in me not to recoil. This man who I'd loved, who I'd trusted, was hugging me while planning my death. I'll call the attorney tomorrow, he said. We can have everything finalized within 2 weeks. Perfect, I said, smiling. That night, while Richard slept, I photographed every document in his home office. I found the life insurance policy. My signature forged on the beneficiary change form. I found emails to Vanessa discussing which attorney to use, who won't ask too many questions. I found a burner phone with texts about making sure the brakes fail convincingly. They weren't planning a simple accident. They were planning murder that would look like car trouble. My hands shook as I copied everything to a secure cloud drive. The next morning, Richard offered to drive me to work. Your car's been making that weird noise, he said. Let me take it to the shop for you today. That's sweet, I said, but I already made an appointment for Saturday. His jaw tightened, but he smiled. Sure. Saturday works. I knew I had less than a week. What Richard didn't know, what no one knew except my parents' attorney, was that my father hadn't just left me money. He'd left me something far more valuable. Preparation. Mr. Williams called me into his office the next day, after I'd sent him the evidence I'd gathered. Your father anticipated something like this might happen, he said. Not this specifically, but some kind of betrayal. That's why he structured your inheritance the way he did. What do you mean? The $4.5 million you received. That's real and it's yours. But the remainder of the estate, the additional $4.7 million, the properties, the restaurant, they're not in your name yet. They're in a trust that your mother controls, with a provision that they only transfer to you upon her death, or if certain emergency conditions are met. What conditions? If your life is ever endangered by a spouse, or if you divorce under suspicious circumstances, the trust has provisions to protect you. Your father also left instructions for me in the event you ever discovered a threat. He authorized me to take certain actions. He slid a document across the desk. Sign this, and I can move forward with what your father planned. I read it quickly. It was authorization for Mr. Williams to act on my behalf in transferring assets, filing police reports, and initiating divorce proceedings if necessary. Sign. What happens now? Yes. Now we set a trap of our own. Mr. Williams worked quickly. Within 3 days, he had coordinated with the police, provided them with all my evidence, and set up surveillance. The plan was simple. Let Richard think everything was proceeding as planned, then catch him in the act of attempted murder. But I couldn't wait. The danger was too real, and my nerves were fraying. Every time Richard smiled at me, every time he touched my hand, I felt sick. On Friday night, I came home to find Richard with a bottle of champagne. I have good news, he said. The trust paperwork is ready. We can sign on Monday. That's wonderful, I said. I thought we should celebrate. Just you and me. He poured 2 glasses, handed me one. I pretended to sip while he drank deeply. You know what I love about you, Margaret, he said, his words slightly slurred. Was he drunk or just pretending? You're so trusting. So naive. You really thought a Worthington would marry you for love. My blood ran cold. What? Come on. You're a smart woman. You must have figured it out by now. He laughed. The moment I found out about your money, everything changed. Before that, you were just a phase. A rebellion against my mother. But $4 million. He whistled. That's worth staying married for. I don't understand. Of course you don't. You're too busy feeling grateful that someone like me would marry someone like you. He poured himself more champagne. Here's the thing, Margaret. In 2 years after a tragic accident, I'll be a grieving widower with millions of dollars. Vanessa and I will wait a respectful amount of time, then marry. Everyone will sympathize with me. The poor man who lost his wife so young. You're drunk, I said, my voice shaking. Maybe. But I'm not wrong. He stood, swaying slightly. You want to know the best part? You signed the insurance papers yourself. You signed the trust documents yourself. When you die, no one will suspect anything. Just a terrible accident. When I die, I repeated. He realized his mistake then. Saw the look on my face. Margaret, you're planning to kill me. Don't be dramatic. For the money, he screamed. You're going to murder me for my inheritance. Richard's face went hard. Keep your voice down. Why? So the neighbors don't hear. So no one knows what you're planning. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed my arm, squeezing hard enough to bruise. You're hysterical. You need to calm down. Let go of me. Not until you stop this crazy talk. You're imagining things. I saw the emails, Richard. I saw the texts to Vanessa. I know everything. His grip tightened. For the first time in our marriage, I saw real danger in his eyes. This wasn't the charming man I'd married. This was a predator. If you saw those, then you know you can't go to anyone, he said quietly. Who would believe you? The poor immigrant girl accusing her wealthy husband of plotting murder. My family has lawyers, Margaret. The best lawyers. We'll destroy you. Me. He released my arm with a shove, and I stumbled back against the kitchen counter. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to calm down. Tomorrow you're going to drive your car to the shop like you planned. And whatever happens after that, well, that's just fate. You tampered with my car. He smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. Prove it. That's when the front door opened. Detective Sarah Martinez walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Behind them was Mr. Williams and my mother, who I'd called before coming home. Richard Worthington, Detective Martinez said, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and attempted insurance fraud. The color drained from Richard's face. This is ridiculous. You can't. We have emails, text messages, recorded conversations, and a confession we just captured on audio. She pointed to my purse, where I'd hidden a recording device. Your wife has been working with us for the past 3 days. Richard lunged at me, but the officers grabbed him. You bitch. You set me up. No, I said calmly, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. You set yourself up. I just gave you enough rope to hang yourself. As they dragged him out in handcuffs, he screamed threats, promises of what his family would do, how their lawyers would destroy me. But I knew something he didn't. The Worthington family fortune. It wasn't nearly as impressive as they believed. Richard's father's investment firm was hemorrhaging money. I discovered that in my research. They needed my money more than I'd ever needed theirs. And Vanessa. She'd turned state's evidence the moment the police approached her, throwing Richard under the bus to save herself. So much for true love. The trial was a media sensation. The wealthy San Francisco family, the murder plot, the hidden heiress. It had everything the press loved. Richard was sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. Vanessa got 3 years for her role in the insurance fraud scheme. The Worthington family tried to sue me, claiming I'd entrapped their son. The case was thrown out when my attorneys, the best that money could buy, presented the evidence of Richard's premeditation. Patricia Worthington never spoke to me again, which suited me fine. I moved back into the apartment above my parents' restaurant with my mother. The space that had once felt confining now felt safe, filled with memories of my father's wisdom and my mother's love. I took over managing my father's investments and grew them substantially. I expanded the restaurant into 3 locations, hired cousins and family friends, created jobs in the community. And I never ever told anyone my net worth again. Now, at 58, I've been single for 30 years. I've had relationships, but I've never remarried. I'm not bitter, I'm careful. There's a difference. My mother passed away 5 years ago, leaving me the remainder of the estate. I'm now worth approximately $32 million, though no one would know it to look at me. I still live simply, still work at the restaurant sometimes, still dress in modest clothes from mainstream stores. I've learned what my father tried to teach me. Wealth is not about displays or status. It's about freedom, security, and the ability to help others without being exploited. I've also learned that my mother was right. Marriage without honesty is built on sand. But honesty must be strategic. The world is full of people like Richard, who see kindness as weakness and trust as opportunity. The greatest gift my father gave me wasn't the money. It was the lesson that being underestimated is a superpower. When people think you're poor, desperate, or naive, they reveal their true nature. They show you who they really are. Richard mocked me for being poor. His family looked down on me. They never knew that the quiet Chinese woman at their table could buy and sell them twice over. By the time they discovered the truth, they'd already shown me exactly who they were. And that knowledge, that clarity, saved my life. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. This experience taught me lessons I hope you never have to learn the hard way. Trust your instincts. If someone shows you who they are, believe them. If your family warns you about someone, listen. If a situation feels wrong, it probably is. Wealth, poverty, status, these are just labels. What matters is character. And character reveals itself not in how people treat those above them, but in how they treat those they believe are beneath them. Richard treated me with contempt when he thought I was poor. He showed me his true character long before he revealed his murderous intentions. I just didn't want to see it. Don't make my mistake. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think twice about trust and betrayal, please hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts, or if you've ever experienced something similar. Remember, the best defense against betrayal is awareness. Stay alert, trust yourself, and never let anyone make you feel less than you are, regardless of what's in your bank account. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there.